Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you was never meant to be heard by anyone outside the room where it happened. It began with a sentence so sharp it carved the air open. "I wish you were never born." Not whispered, not accidental, spoken with the precision of someone who wanted witnesses. And in that instant, in the clatter of forks, the stunned silence, the way the entire room seemed to tilt, I realized something most men never understand until it's too late. Some families aren't families, they're systems, and some mothers aren't mothers. They're architects of hierarchy, and you were never meant to rise above your assigned floor. But you already know that feeling, don't you? You know the moment when the mask slips, when the person who raised you stops pretending, even for a breath, and you see the machinery underneath. The gears of expectation, control, and quiet emotional taxation turning like an ancient engine fed by your obedience. That night, at the graduation dinner I paid for, in the room I reserved, wearing the suit I earned through sleepless years and invisible labor, I stood face to face with the truth. I wasn't the child they loved. I was the child they used. And the thing about suppressed truths is, once you see them, you can't unsee them. My mother said the words to wound me, but instead they woke something, a presence, a clarity, a cold, steady awareness that felt older than the room, older than the building, older than my entire life, because every man eventually meets the moment when he stops believing the story he was trained to live and finally sees the structure behind it. And once you see the structure, you start seeing the patterns, the favoritism engineered to keep you compliant, the comparisons designed to reduce your worth, the subtle rewrites of memory, the emotional taxes you never agreed to pay. When she spoke those words, she wasn't breaking me. She was revealing herself. And in the silence that followed, the entire room waited to see if I'd collapse under the weight of it, like the boy they believed I still was. But boys break, men awaken. And that night, I didn't fall. I rose quietly, steadily, with the kind of controlled power that terrifies people who depend on your submission. Because the moment she wished me out of existence was the moment I claimed it. When I walked out of that room, it wasn't an exit. It was an emergence, the kind of moment older cultures used to mark with fire, ink, or ritual, the breaking of one identity so another could take its place. But in our modern world, no one warns you that sometimes the initiation into manhood comes disguised as betrayal. The Seattle night was cold enough to sting, rain drifting sideways like the city itself was whispering. Now you see, and maybe you know that feeling, the night you step outside after someone finally shows you who they are, and the world suddenly feels clearer, sharper, aligned, because when a parent tells you they regret your existence, they're not speaking to the adult you've become. They're speaking to the child they believe still lives inside you, the one who needs their approval to breathe. But that child in me didn't rise. He died. And something older took his place. On the walk home, my phone kept buzzing, not with concern, not with remorse, but with the same pattern of messages used by people who see you as a resource, not a son, 11 missed calls. A single text, cold, moralizing, weaponized, "You embarrassed us." That's how systems behave when you stop feeding them. They panic. I sat on the floor of my apartment, rain in my hair, blazer still on, staring at nothing, but inside, there was movement. Memories reorganizing themselves, years of imbalance suddenly making sense. The favoritism, the dismissal, the way my accomplishments were treated like noise while my sisters were treated like divine prophecy. And that's when I realized the truth men rarely admit out loud. Some families build their entire stability on one person sacrificing themselves quietly, one person carrying the financial load, one person absorbing the emotional blame, one person being the buffer between dysfunction and collapse, and that person was always me. I opened my banking app, not out of anger but precision. The transfers I'd been making for years sat there like chains disguised as responsibilities. Utilities, tuition, the mortgage that wasn't even mine. My finger hovered for a single breath, and then I cut every line. Cancel, cancel, cancel. 3 clicks, 3 severed ties, 3 pieces of myself reclaimed. And as the silence settled into the room, something inside me shifted, not violently, but with the gravity of a man stepping into his own power for the first time in his life. If you're still listening, you're already descending deeper. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence so complete it felt deliberate, the kind of silence people use when they believe you'll crawl back on your own. Except this time, I didn't chase, I didn't explain, I didn't negotiate with people who had already revealed the truth of what I meant to them. And here's something no one teaches men: when you stop being the one who bends first, the entire architecture of your relationships shifts. People who relied on your compliance begin to tremble because they know they have no power without your willingness to absorb the damage. Work became a refuge, not a distraction, a forge. Long hours didn't drain me the way they used to. They sharpened me because, for the first time in my life, everything I poured out came back to me: respect, trust, authority. None of it demanded loyalty in exchange. None of it punished me for shining. And then the article came out, the local business magazine featuring my work, my strategy, my resilience. A story written about me, not the sister who had been cast as the son my entire life. My inbox filled with messages from strangers who understood exactly what it meant to be the forgotten one, the reliable one, the one who survives on scraps of acknowledgement. For the first time, I realized how many men carried similar scars, how many had been trained to stay small, stay useful, stay silent. But silence never lasts, not in systems built on taking. Owing Tuesday evening, after a 12-hour day, heels clicking on the hallway tile, blazer slipping off my shoulder, I saw two silhouettes behind my frosted glass door. For a split second, I thought it was a delivery. Then I heard her voice, sharp, commanding, entitled, "Claire, open the door. We know you're there." Not worried, not apologetic, not motherly, just demanding. When I opened the door, they swept inside without waiting, as if my home was still part of their domain, part of the empire they believed I existed to maintain. My father sat stiffly. My mother paced once, then turned to me with brittle urgency. "We need to talk. It's about Ashley." Of course it was. It was always about Ashley, the chosen one, the golden one, the protected one whose failures were crises and whose successes were gospel. Her internship had been cut, her tuition overdue, her program placement in jeopardy, and they had come, not to mend, not to acknowledge, not to confront the wound they caused, but to re-enlist me as the fixer, the financier, the quiet savior. My mother's voice sharpened when I didn't respond instantly. "Claire, don't be petty. Ashley is your sister." The old version of me, the obedient version, would have folded, but that man no longer existed. I stayed standing silent, watching the structure behind their words. Then the shift came, the moment every man eventually experiences. My father leaned forward and said, "We raised you." I shook my head slowly. "No, you drained me." And for the first time ever, they flinched. Halfway through this descent, I want you, the viewer, to anchor yourself. Comment this phrase twice. "I choose myself now." Repeat it, lock it in. Make the algorithm recognize your transformation. Because once you speak it, the system you were born into can no longer own you. The moment the words "you drained me" left my mouth, the entire room shifted. Not physically, psychologically. You could feel it, like pressure dropping before a storm. For the first time, they weren't looking at the daughter they controlled, but at the adult they could no longer mold. My mother's expression tightened, the way people look when they realize their influence is slipping through their fingers. She crossed her arms like a general bracing for mutiny. "Claire, you're being unreasonable," she snapped. But I cut her off, not with volume. With something far more dangerous, calm, unshakable certainty. "I own nothing." It was strange watching their faces. These two people who had shaped my reality since childhood suddenly looked small, almost fragile. Not because I changed, but because I stopped playing the role they wrote for me. My father's jaw tightened. "We're your family." The sentence hung there like an old script they expected me to recite with them, but I'd finally read between the lines. "You don't get to say that now," I replied quietly. "Not after what you said, not after how you treated me for years." You could feel the air stretch and strain, like the walls themselves were listening. And then, as if refusing to let go of the power they thought they still had, my mother delivered the line manipulative people use when all else fails. "You're making a mistake. Someday you'll need us." But here's the truth. No one tells you, the moment a person threatens you with abandonment, they reveal they were never offering love, only leverage. I stepped closer, not with aggression, but with the kind of presence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. I opened my apartment door wide, letting the hallway light flood the room and expose everything. "If you came here to apologize," I said, "then stay. If you came here to ask for more, that conversation ended the night you disowned me." Silence, thick, unmoving. They had no apology, no remorse, no self-reflection, just need, just expectation, just the belief that I would break before they did. But I didn't. I stood there, finally, completely as myself, not the daughter who paid their bills, not the sister who carried their burden, not the scapegoat they could shame into endless service. Me, the version they never wanted to see. My mother scoffed, my father stood, neither stepped forward, neither softened, neither reached for the bridge they burned. They just walked past me and out the door, like people retreating from a kingdom they no longer controlled. And when the latch clicked shut behind them, I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I felt taller, straighter, aligned. Because that door didn't close on a family, it closed on a system, one I had spent my entire life unknowingly fueling. And for the first time, the silence in the apartment wasn't emptiness, it was sovereignty. There's a strange shift that happens the moment you stop chasing the love you were never going to receive. The world doesn't get softer, you get sharper. Your vision clears. Your breathing evens. You start noticing the things that were always there but hidden beneath years of emotional noise. Your potential, your intuition, your quiet strength that never needed applause to be real. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't scare me. It freed me. Because when someone tells you they wish you were never born, they expect you to crumble. They expect you to fold into yourself, kneel, apologize, beg for some version of love that always required you to shrink. They expect you to carry their pain as if it were purpose. But I didn't give them that. I gave them distance. Distance, the one thing emotionally dependent people fear more than confrontation. They can handle your tears, they can handle your anger, but your absence, your silence, your refusal to play the role they wrote for you, that terrifies them. And as the days rolled on, something unexpected happened. A call started coming. The messages dripped in, first coated in false concern, then wrapped in blame, then laced with guilt. Because when a system loses its most obedient piece, it doesn't adapt. It collapses. But I didn't respond, not out of spite, but out of evolution. I wasn't the person they spoke to at that dinner table. I wasn't the child they tried to rewrite history around. I wasn't the emotional sponge they drained to fill their own emptiness. I had become someone else, someone who no longer needed permission to exist, someone who no longer mistook survival for love. Someone who finally understood that breaking away is not betrayal. It's rebirth, and in that new life, the one I chose, not the one I inherited, I started building something they never expected me to build, a self they could no longer control. But here's the part nobody ever talks about, the part that separates those who just escape from those who truly transform. Leaving isn't the end. Silence isn't the victory. Distance isn't the healing. The real battle begins the moment you start rebuilding the identity they tried to erase. Because when you grow up in a household where love is conditional and approval is a currency you never had enough of, you don't just walk away clean. You walk away carrying ghosts. Ghosts of guilt you never earned, ghosts of self-doubt planted in you like seeds, ghosts of a child still waiting for a version of love that will never arrive. And healing is not one dramatic moment. It's 1,000 small choices made in rooms where nobody applauds. It's learning to trust your voice after years of being taught to doubt it. It's recognizing your emotions instead of policing them. It's setting boundaries without trembling. It's saying no without explaining yourself like you're on trial. It's choosing peace even when chaos feels familiar. Some days you rise like you were born for this. Other days you crumble staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe you are the problem, because that's what you were trained to believe. But slowly, quietly, steadily, truth replaces programming. Your life stops being a reaction to their pain and starts becoming a reflection of your own purpose. Your worth stops being something they vote on and becomes something you define. And your story, the one they tried to cut short, begins to stretch beyond their reach. Because transformation isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, it doesn't need an audience. It's a decision you make over and over. I will not inherit their wounds. I will build something different. And with every small step, every boundary, every moment of clarity, You start becoming the kind of person they never believed you could be. Someone whole, someone grounded, someone powerful, someone who finally understands that the greatest revenge is not anger or confrontation. It's becoming the version of yourself they never imagined and can no longer control. And that brings us to the moment nobody expected. Not them, not the people watching, not even the version of me who sat at that graduation dinner trying to swallow years of hurt like it was nothing. Because transformation doesn't stay hidden forever. Eventually, it shows. Eventually, it arrives in a form that forces the world to see you as you truly are, not as the character they scripted, but as the author of your own life. For me, that moment came quietly. No confrontation, no dramatic speech, no revenge fantasy played out in real life. Just results, the kind of results that silence every old voice telling you that you're not enough. I built a life, a real life, one rooted in purpose, discipline, and self-respect. The kind of life that doesn't need validation, approval, or applause to feel solid. The kind that isn't shaped by fear or guilt or childhood conditioning, but by choice. And when they eventually saw it, when they realized I wasn't broken, weak, or lost without them, when they recognized that their words didn't end me but ignited me, everything changed. Because people who once tried to minimize you will always be shaken when they realize you no longer live in the shadow they built for you. People who relied on your silence will always be stunned when they discover you learned to speak, not loudly but clearly. And people who wanted you small will always be uncomfortable when you finally stand at your full height. That's what they didn't expect. Not anger, not revenge, not collapse, but evolution. They didn't expect me to rise. They didn't expect me to succeed. They didn't expect me to build a life so stable, so grounded, so authentically mine that their absence felt less like loss and more like removal of weight. And maybe the most powerful part of all is this: I didn't do it despite what they said. I did it because I finally understood something they never wanted me to see, that my life was never supposed to belong to their pain. It was supposed to belong to me. And once I claimed it, every door they tried to close, every limit they tried to place, every doubt they tried to plant became fuel. That's the ending nobody expected. I didn't become who they feared. I became who I was meant to be. And so if there's one truth this entire journey has carved into me, it's this: your story doesn't end where someone else tries to break you. It begins where you decide to rebuild yourself. What happened at that graduation dinner wasn't a curse. It was a revelation, a moment that stripped away illusions and forced me to see the world and myself with unfiltered clarity. Sometimes the harshest words become the sharpest tools, carving out the path you were always meant to walk. Because healing isn't about proving them wrong. It isn't about chasing apologies that may never come. It isn't about rising out of spite. It's about rising because you finally understand your worth was never theirs to define in the first place. Your life is not a vote. Your value is not up for debate. Your existence was never a mistake, no matter who tried to convince you otherwise. If you've ever been the one who felt unwanted, unseen, underestimated, or dismissed, hear me. You are not the echo of someone else's pain. You are not the product of their wounds. You are not the version of you they tried to limit. You are the author now, and the chapters ahead belong entirely to you. So let this be your reminder, or your awakening. Distance is not disrespect. Boundaries are not betrayal. Healing is not rebellion. And becoming who you were meant to be is not something you need permission for. Walk forward without fear. Build without apology. Live without shrinking. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can ever do is simply, finally, fully become yourself.